United Maple Producers, and I'm here at Brillion Nature Center with Angela Schumacher from Smoky Lake Maple Products. I'm here with Louie here she is the naturalist, the resident naturalist at the Brillion Nature Center, and Louie is going to share her expertise with us as we identify trees and which ones you should tap and which ones you should not tap. So we're ready to rock and roll. Thanks to Smoky Lake Maple Products for sponsoring this and making this a possibility today. So Louie, we are here today because we want to know what trees should we tap, which ones should we leave alone?
Very good. Welcome to the Brillion Nature Center Sugarbush. We're going to actually head into the woods, and as we're walking down the trail, I'm going to point out a couple things to you, and we'll talk more specifically about the different kinds of trees and what you can do. This particular area was managed as a sugar bush for well over 50 years. And so ours is largely sugar maples out here. We do have other tree species mixed in, but anything of tappable size is pretty much a sugar maple. So I'm not really today going to get into the differences between the different types of maples, other than to say that you can tap any maple. Anything in the maple family will give you edible sap. It's just that the sugar maples give the highest percentage of sugar in their sap, and they run for the longest period of time. So you're going to get the most yield from sugar maples. And that's why it was managed for that specific species. So, shall we enter the trail?
Sure.
All right.
So are you okay with people asking questions live as we go through here?
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll let you know if anyone makes a comment.
So show us some of these sugar maples. They all look different. How can we tell?
We're coming up to one right here. You can tell by the 5-lobed leaf, and it has a much broader leaf than the other maples. Some of the maple species have just a 3-lobed leaf, and some of them, the leaves are much smaller than on a sugar maple. But that's also going to vary from tree to tree just by the health and vigor of that specific tree.
And that's why it's ideal to identify your trees now before the spring when they're all gone.
Absolutely. By the time we're tapping, we're in mid-February and at the latest early March. And when you're tapping at that time, there's no trees that have leaves at all. So people always say you can identify them by the buds and by the bark. And it's true that maple trees are one of the only tree in Wisconsin that has alternate budding and alternate branching, which means that they come in pairs right across from each other. There are only 2 other trees in this part of the state that bud and branch that way, and that's the ash tree and the dogwood tree. Dogwood would never be confused for a maple, and you'd be unlikely to find one of a size that you'd be able to tap anyway. So that one's not a problem. Ash trees on this property have been tapped by accident because of the buds being alternate like the maples are.
Can you show me a close-up? I wasn't able to really
zoom in on it.
How's
okay.
that?
So you mean like this and this? They're
with the branches staggered?
The branching pattern is going to be more visible up in the higher crown. But the leaves themselves, you can see where the petiole attaches to the twig. Those leaves are right across from each other.
Oh, okay, I see.
So they come in pairs like that. Okay, this would be an example of the alternate branching right there. 2 branches right across from each other.
Oh, okay. So towards the end.
Yep, here's another one right across from each other.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
All right, don't let me hit you.
So another way to identify trees is their bark pattern, but you mentioned earlier that there are some problems with identifying bark, especially if you're not familiar.
Exactly, and as we get up the trail further, we'll take a look at some of the trees that we do tap and take a look at their bark, and you'll understand what I'm talking about at that time.
All right, let's walk on. Angela, are you getting any of those mosquitoes?
Oh man, those are bad today.
They're super hungry. All right, one of the ways we identify maple trees out here at Brillion Nature Center is, as I said, the tree itself, if it's of tappable size, it's going to be pretty characteristic, as any field guide or YouTube video on the subject will tell you. It's got very deep platy bark where you can actually grab chunks of the bark and rip them right off the tree if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
We do it a little different here. Rather than identifying by bark, if you want to come around to this side, we're looking for old scars in the tree where we've tapped in previous years. They look like a belly button on the tree.
That's
And
adorable.
it's real easy because we tap every year. It's real easy to find a pretty fresh belly button on a tree from the year's previous tapping.
It's the cutest thing I think I've ever heard.
All right, we're coming to a tree that just recently fell across the trail, so watch for the branch here. All right, all of this stuff we're passing here is way too small to tap. So it really is, there's no point in talking about the bark on the smaller trees because those are not going to be trees you tap anyway.
So we were just talking about the belly button.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything that can be mistaken for a belly button that really isn't a belly button?
Sometimes where trees have shed their branches just because of not getting enough sunlight, and a branch will die off and the tree will actually do a self-pruning. Sometimes people can mistake that, but usually there's a stub there.
Okay.
So it would be really hard to mistake self-pruning for an old tap hole because it's really not a hole.
It still has its
But-
umbilical cord.
You can see on this tree, at Brillion Nature Center, volunteers help us tap every year, and you can see there's a lot of tap holes on this tree, previous tap holes, and some of them are very fresh because this tree does get tapped every year. It's big, it's beautiful, appears very healthy, but
A lot of sap.
if you look up and follow the tree to the top, this tree doesn't give any sap because it is completely dead, and it's very easy to forget to look up. And it's really important to do that when you're assessing the health of the trees that you're tapping. In this particular case, this one's dead.
It looks so remarkably healthy.
And it does. From here, from the ground
bark,
level, it looks like the
everything.
perfect tree to tap. And
The diameter.
every year it gets tapped at least once, and last year it got tapped twice.
So when do you tell them?
I never do because it's so much fun to show them after they put the tap in. And it's not doing any damage to an already
Viewers,
dead
take
tree.
note.
Yeah. Hopefully my volunteers are all watching today.
Oh, that'd be great. Anybody who's just logging on now, we are with Louie at the Brillion Nature Center, and she is taking us for a walk in their Sugarbush. We're going to do some bark comparison and learn more about how difficult it can be to ID your trees.
All right, we're approaching our sugar shack. This is the place where we would actually do the boiling once we have enough sap to start. And we're walking on a well-groomed trail, and we've passed a couple areas where the trail shoots off to one side or the other. It's really important when you're emptying sap buckets, when you're doing a survey of your woods, when you're doing anything that requires heavy equipment, even just a four-wheeler and a trailer, that you stay on those well-traveled paths, because every time you bring heavy equipment into your woods, you're compacting the soil, you're stressing the roots, you're possibly nicking trees, breaking bark off and doing damage. So it's important to try to keep any of that heavy equipment that could do damage to roots or trunks on well-traveled paths. And that way you do the minimum damage in your sugar bush. So what we try to do is make our traveled paths in close enough range to the trees that we tap that we can easily walk to the trees, grab the sap buckets, empty them on the trailer, and put them back. So we also, being an environmental center, we have the advantage that we get a lot of school groups that field trip out here, and as a part of their program, they empty our buckets for us. So it's pretty easy and fun for them. So coming up here, we have several maples in this area. We're going to walk out a little bit into the woods.
Okay. Now you mentioned something about mushrooms growing in an area. I suppose that's not roots. That's all dead wood.
Right. Yeah, and fungus will grow up even just right on the ground. Mm-hmm. So there is one maple tree disease that presents itself as a fungus-like appearance on the roots. And it's actually a lethal condition for the tree. That would be a tree you want to cut down and get out of your woods. You don't want that one to spread. But it's it's not the same. That disease isn't the same as the regular fungus that you would see growing in any woodland. But here we have a little cluster of maple trees, and this is why I mentioned to you that I don't like suggesting that people who want to get into maple syruping try to identify their trees by the bark. Identifying trees by bark is great for forest, for people who spend a lot of time in the woods or really know their own woodland well. People who really know their own woodland can walk to any individual tree and tell you what it is. But if you're not out there every day looking, identifying by bark, this is a maple tree. This is a maple tree.
Wow, that's crazy.
This is a maple tree. And this is a maple tree. And this one is the only one that has that real characteristic.
I'm sorry.
Here we go. Sorry about that.
Okay, are we back?
Yeah, it looks like we're
again.
back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at, can you see the trees from these first two anyway and still have a signal?
Can you
Okay.
zoom?
So if you look at this one's got pretty rough, big bark. This one's got a little tighter bark. And this one's got the big heavy plating where I could rip chunks off if I wanted to. And the only real difference between any of these trees is their age. So maple bark really changes in character as a tree ages, and it's very difficult because it also varies among the different species of maple. So when you have a mixed maple forest and you're looking at different age trees, different species of maple, you know, if you look at this tree right here, and I don't know if you can you see this one? I'm going to walk to it. Can you see this one from where you're standing?
Yes.
Okay, in this nice cluster. I was so excited. I came up to this tree and it's like, I want to see if it's big enough to tap. So I have a tool here called a diameter tape, which is calibrated to measure the diameter of the tree, converting it from the circumference of the tree. So I walked around. I want to make sure I have at least between an 8 and a 10-inch diameter. And this one is at 9.5 inches. And I was so excited because I was going to get a ton of sap. And I looked up and it is a basswood tree. It's not a maple tree. And there is nothing about this bark that would have told me that. Without being able to see the leaves, I would have tapped that tree. In fact, it probably will get tapped. Whoops.
Oh, okay, now we're back. Sorry, folks.
All right.
We're
Having some technical
We're back.
difficulties. Out of range here, off the grid.
Trying to identify trees with leaves, the only tricky part about that is follow it up to a branch, follow the branch out to the leaves. Make sure the branch and the leaves you're looking at are connected to the tree you want to identify. Because when you're in a dense stand, it's real easy to look up and see maple leaves and not realize it was a branch coming around from a different tree. Critical errors are made when people pick up leaves off the ground and say, oh, it's a maple tree because there's leaves right at the base. Leaves don't fall like rain. Leaves fall like this. They fall like this. They get swirled by the wind. They get kicked by feet as people walk by. And lots of different leaves are going to be mixed around the base, not just the ones that fell from that tree. So if we look at the base of this tree, we're going to find basswood leaves, we're going to find maple leaves, we're going to find ash leaves, and it's irrelevant. Don't look on the ground to identify your trees. It's very important. So,
I have a question,
Sure.
actually. I know, actually, this is Angela's question. She's asking, kind of unrelated, but about the color of trees and maybe
oh, sure.
why do some maple trees turn red and some turn yellow?
Exactly.
And you mentioned earlier that sometimes turning colors earlier is a sign of maybe compromised health in the tree.
Right. If a tree is going through a stress year because of drought, because of not enough sun, because of insect problems or other diseases, a lot of times they'll drop their leaves early. The leaves, if they turn brown and crumble and fall off, that's a really bad sign for the tree because those leaves are dying. When they turn yellow, it might just be stressed and they're shutting down early. That doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a death sentence for the tree, but it means that that probably isn't a great tree to tap because you don't want to stress it further. You want to give it a year to recover before you tap that one again.
Does it just mean less syrup, or there's a chance you could kill your tree?
There's a chance you could kill the tree. If it's already stressed and you're taking sap, that tree has to work. It's not really one tap isn't going to remove a quantity of sap that would kill a tree. Over tapping, putting multiple taps in, that could do it. But one tap isn't enough to really kill a tree. But if the tree is already stressed, it's trying to recover from that wound. That wound is opening that tree up to any kind of fungus or parasites or diseases or things that can get into that hole. And if it doesn't section off that wound quickly enough, it can get into the tree and move throughout the healthy wood. So you don't want that to happen. So it's best if you know a tree is stressed to just give it a year to recover before you tap it again. But
completely relate as a mom.
Exactly.
Yeah, give me a year, you know.
Having said that, not all maple trees turn red. Even healthy, vigorous maple trees, not all of them turn red. Some of them turn yellow, and that's where they stop. So why do some trees turn red and some trees do not? And it's because the green in the leaf is chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is a very unstable pigment. It goes away very quickly. So throughout the growing season, the tree is constantly producing more chloroplasts and producing more chlorophyll to keep it green. When the tree starts to go dormant, it stops producing chlorophyll, and the chlorophyll is going to be the first thing to break down. So when that breaks down, the colors beneath the chlorophyll, the ones that have been hidden all year, show through. And those are from pigments like carotene, which is the same thing in carrots, makes them orange, or xanthophyll is the yellow pigment. Those are already there, just masked by the chlorophyll. So when the chlorophyll breaks down, they're more stable pigments, so they're going to show up longer.
Wow.
Red is not automatically in the tree right away. It has a pigment called anthomycin, and that pigment, if it's present in the leaf, makes a chemical reaction with sugars that get trapped in the leaf, and that chemical reaction is what turns it red. So that one is not a color that's already there. It's a color that forms depending on how much sugar is in that leaf. If those molecules aren't present in the leaf to begin with, it's not going to turn red. So any leaf that doesn't have that anthomycin isn't going to turn red at all. So isn't capable of it because the chemical reaction is not going to happen. So while sugar maples certainly trap sugar in the leaves, they don't have the rest of ingredients to create that chemical reaction.
I see.
Yeah. So most red maples will, and again, not all, which is weird, but most red maples will turn bright blazing red in the fall.
Oh, it's so beautiful too.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's a good one. So we thought it would be interesting. The trees themselves are made of layers. You know, you have the outside layer bark that protects the tree, and then you have the layer that adds new wood every year, makes the tree wider and wider and wider, which is the cambium layer. You have the xylem and the phloem, which is where sap is conducted up and down in the tree. And the very center of the tree is the heartwood. And heartwood, another name for heartwood is deadwood. It's the old xylem, it's the old sapwood that isn't functional anymore. So the tree and all those other layers has the capacity to fight wounds, section off wounds, fight disease, make sure it doesn't spread through the tree. The heartwood is not a living part of the tree. All it provides for the tree is strength.
Interesting.
And so if disease would get all the way into the heartwood, that whole part of the tree is vulnerable. There's no way to fight rot in the heartwood since it's already dead. So it's very important when people tap trees that they don't drill all the way into the heartwood because there's no defenses there.
And you've got a sample.
I have a sample because when that happens, when a wound enters that far or something that's going to deteriorate the tree enters that far into the tree, it causes a hollow trunk situation, which again isn't lethal to the tree. The hollow trunk is just going to mean that tree's a little weaker, not quite as strong. And so in a big wind, more likely to crack off and fall. And that happened here. And we use our deadfalls for firewood to fire our evaporator. So as we were cutting up a deadfall that broke off in the wind, we thought, let's cut it right at that 4.5 foot level where we tap every year and see if we can find the old tap holes in the wood. So we cut off slices, and I have one over here.
That's so interesting. I've never actually seen the inside of a tap hole. So you showed me this.
I didn't see the inside of a tap hole even after slicing it up, because
You want me to hold that up?
you can see this year where it was tapped, that's where the rot got in, and it worked for a good long time, just completely hollowing out that center. But all this was healthy, sound wood all around it. You can see the tree healing itself one layer at a time, actually curling around and filling in the old tap hole. This tree was tapped so many times, and there's no holes in that sound wood because they all healed. So every one of these little rectangles was a wound in the tree that was sealed off and filled in again with new wood. And if you flip it over on the other side, you can see a bunch more. All of those are old tap holes that healed and filled in. So as we're tapping our trees, even though we are wounding the tree by doing that, the tree has the capability of sectioning off that wound and healing and creating new wood. So they say every year you should tap in a different spot. Give that old tap hole a time to heal and fill in. After you make it all the way around the tree, 10 or more years have passed, and you can tap in that same spot again. You're hitting fresh new wood by the time you make it all the way around.
Wow. Well, this would be a helpful learning aid for all of your volunteers too.
Yeah,
when they
exactly.
come in.
One question that we've gotten a lot from beginners is, do you have to plug your holes?
No, in fact, you shouldn't. Yeah, you shouldn't.
yeah.
It looks like we stuck a plug in there, doesn't it? But no, you actually shouldn't do anything to the hole. I know there are some people who, when they first drill the hole, they make sure their equipment is sterile, but some people actually spray a bleach water solution into the hole after they've tapped it to try to keep that hole sterile. But once you've removed the tap, do no more. Don't plug it, don't stick your finger in there, don't blow into the hole, just leave it alone. By then the tree is already sectioning off that area. If it's a healthy and vigorous tree, it's already sectioning off that area and keeping anything out of the rest of the healthy wood.
So what happens when you start blowing on it, or
any bacteria or anything in your saliva and in your mouth is going to be entering directly into the tree. So it's a bad thing
to a tree.
And I know there's a lot of people who, you know, after they drill the hole, well, there's still sawdust in the hole and I don't want it to plug up my equipment. Well, here's the thing, people. That sap is traveling through wood fiber all the way up to your sap. It can handle the sawdust too. It's gonna get through there. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Noted.
So yeah, don't stick anything ever into the hole other than the initial drill. And when you back the drill out, most of that sawdust will come out with the drill bit. So it's not even a necessary problem to have to deal with.
Wow, do you have any other suggestions for a tree ID? That was fascinating. Any questions from the crowd out there? I don't know if you see anything popping up there, Angela?
I haven't seen any comments yet. But I do see that there's people out there if you have questions.
Yeah, chime in.
All right.
Louie's here.
It's kind of interesting. One of the questions that you threw at me earlier was what states have maple trees as their state tree. We know Wisconsin has it as the state tree, so are there other states that do as well? And I looked it up. There are 4 states that have sugar maple as their state tree. They are Vermont, New York, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. And Rhode Island has red maple as its state tree. So lots of our states have decided that this is a worthy tree to be named the state tree.
Well, it's definitely worthwhile, especially since it's so sweet.
Yes, absolutely.
So what would be some advice you could give to people who want to get some experience but either don't have their own land to tap, but wanting to get into it and aren't really sure? I know, Louie.
Well, around here, one way somebody can try it out without having to make any financial investment whatsoever is to come out and volunteer at a center like this that does maple syruping every year. At Brillion Nature Center, I'm the only full-time staff person here, so I depend heavily on volunteers. Every year in February, we have a tree tapping day. No training required. Everything will be trained right on site.
That's awesome.
And people come out, we put in about 100 taps. So by the time we finish for the day, anybody who's new knows exactly what they're doing for how to tap a tree. And then every year here at Brillion Nature Center, we have a free public event on the 4th Saturday of March.
Okay.
And that free event takes people through the whole maple syrup processing from everything from identifying the tree to finishing the syrup. We'll actually have sap boiling on that day and be finishing off syrup. People can go to different learning stations and learn how to do syrup grading, learn some cultural history behind maple syruping, watch a tree tapping demonstration, watch the sap boiling and learn how that happens, the filtering process, and then actually taste it over ice cream. And that whole event is family friendly for little ones all the way through grandparents and free of charge. So
that's great.
Welcome you out.
How can people contact you if they want to volunteer? What's the best way to reach you?
The best way is through my email, which is info at brillionnaturecenter.net. You can learn about our programs at our website, which is brillionnaturecenter.net, and you can check us out on our Facebook page, Brillion Nature Center, as well.
Be sure to visit and like. And I don't know, did anybody else have any things to discuss? I'm so thankful that you took the time today. I'm honored. You have so much knowledge.
So get out there, find your trees, look up. Don't forget to look up.
So, I'm Jamie from United Maple Producers, and you were just here today at a Sugarbush walk with Louie at the Brillion Nature Center. Thank you to Smoky Lake Maple Products for making this event possible. And if you haven't done so already, be sure to visit us at unitedmapleproducers.org and sign up for our newsletters. So if you like what you saw today and you want to see more of it, be sure to like and share on Facebook and connect with us so you can share, connect, and grow. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. We're getting